The warnings about a mega recession are coming hard and fast these days, but who are the loudest voices saying this? What are they saying? And if they are right, then, well, what can you do except go and cry somewhere? Well, last month, Jeff Bezos used his media spotlight to issue a very firm warning that a recession is on the horizon. Bezos recommended that American households delay big ticket purchases for things such as TVs, refrigerators, cars, etc., given the risk of worsening economic conditions. Similarly, he suggested that small business owners consider holding off on any investments in any kind of new equipment right now and to build up their cash reserves instead. In recent months, Amazon has been putting Bezos' money where his mouth is because Amazon has actually been cutting costs in a very big way by slowing down spending, freezing hiring for certain roles, likely, of course, in preparation for those exact kind of tougher economic times that Bezos is warning about. In fact, Amazon just announced plans to lay off approximately 10,000 staff before the Christmas rush. And what about Mr. Doom and Gloom himself? Michael Burry. Well, he has been a persistent bearish voice about the likelihood of a major recession. Famously predicting, of course, the housing crash back in 2008, Michael has been talking about the next big bubble for the past few years, starting back in 2019 when he said, when the massive inflows into passive vehicles reverse, it will be ugly. He then said trillions of dollars in assets globally are indexed to these stocks and to be careful. He said the theater keeps getting more crowded, but the exit door is the same as it always was. All this gets worse as you get into even less liquid equity and bond markets globally. This year, Burry blasted the White House as well for calling the possibility of a recession unlikely back in July when the White House came out and tried to kind of revamp the definition of what actually constitutes a recession. The White House came out arguing that the notion that just 2 straight quarters of GDP decline does not in of itself indicate a recession, saying that's neither the official definition nor the way that economists evaluate the state of the business cycle. Okay, White House. Burry made the news again last month when Fortune released an article detailing Michael Burry's warnings for a multi-year recession coming up. In a now deleted tweet after the Fed announced interest rate hikes, Burry wrote, "What strategy will pull us out of this real recession? What forces would pull us there? There are none." So we are really looking at an extended multi-year recession. Who is predicting this? There are none. Then we have billionaire investor Leon Cooperman, who says that the S&P 500 will not hit a new all-time high for a very long time, predicting a US recession and a high inflation environment as being the culprit for that, calling for mediocre returns until fricking 2030, saying we've probably been through the most speculative period in our financial history, aided and abetted by foolish fiscal and monetary policy. The billionaire investor told CNBC in a recent interview, basically, he is saying to get ready for a lost decade. Yikes. Also, we have billionaire investor Stanley Druckenmiller, who foresees a hard landing for the economy by the end of 2023. He said that our central case is a hard landing by the end of 2023. He went on to say, "I will be stunned if we don't have a recession in 2023. I don't know the timing, but look for it by the end of 2023. Now, this legendary investor who has basically never had a down year in markets fears that, well, shit could be about to get real and it could be about to get even worse than it already is. He said, "I don't rule out something really bad." Economists at Goldman Sachs say there's a 35% probability the USA is going to tip into a recession over the next year. Now, that's an estimate that's well below the median of 65% among forecasters in a recent Wall Street Journal survey. Now, before I tell you how all of this can actually play out and what you can do to keep yourself safe during this situation, I want to let you know about my weekly crypto investor newsletter. It's called Wealth Mastery, jam-packed with alpha on altcoins, airdrops, NFTs, DeFi tutorials, market analysis, and much, much more. Join our 50,000 weekly readers by signing up for free using the link in the description. So, are all those billionaires right? And if so, how's it gonna happen? Well, perhaps it's better to ask, how do we get to this point in the first place? Well, if you've been paying attention, then you already kind of know the answer why. After years and years of frivolous government spending and unlimited money printing, Well, it's time to pay the inflation piper, as it were. The Fed's manipulation of interest rates can only last so long before we hit a cool down period, which will become necessary for any kind of healthy economic growth. Now, the IMF's chief economist has actually come out calling inflation the most immediate threat to current and future prosperity. The IMF said that the higher rates, while at this time necessary, are actually creating massive instability, particularly for emerging markets who have high debt levels. This, combined with the stalled economic growth of the world's three largest economies, of course that being the USA, the EU, and China, are fueling the likelihood of a massive recession happening in the next 12 months. October's inflation report also indicates the consumer price index, which of course is a key inflation barometer, jumped 7.7% in October versus a year ago. The annual rate, though, is down from June's 9.1% peak, and of course down from September's 8.2% reading, but it is hovering near the highest levels since the early 1980s, despite commodity prices pulling back a little bit. So we're still quite high, but we are seeing rising energy costs, which have a very strong potential of canceling out any price relief in the commodities markets, particularly for things like wheat and sugar, because high energy and power costs are also going to fuel food price inflation because it's all connected. We also need to factor in that according to Deutsche Bank, unemployment could rise to 4.9% by 2024. And while the demand for blue-collar workers is still pretty high, the demand for white-collar workers seems to be dropping off quite a bit. See, white-collar workers in the tech industry have already been seeing a big uptick in layoffs. In fact, many thousands of white-collar tech workers have already lost their jobs in 2022, with companies like Twitter, Lyft, Stripe, Facebook, all reducing their workforce in a very big way. Inflation, higher interest rates, rising unemployment, basically a nasty economic cocktail which can give you one hell of a financial hangover. So how can you prepare for this situation? Well, Bitcoin, of course, has not been immune to the effects of all this crazy, nor will it be immune to the effects of a recession, but it does remain one of the most substantial long-term investments I believe that you can own. Bitcoin, great long-term store value, way to protect your financial future, all that fun stuff, right? Bitcoin is global. Bitcoin's not subject to the rise and fall of just one economy or one currency. Bitcoin was actually designed in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis for a reason: to give those who don't trust their financial futures with banks and governments basically a plan B. That's what Bitcoin is built for. I also wanted to share this with you. Mortgage insider Tim Pascarella shared some key differences between the state of the market in 2022 and what we saw actually back in the 2008 recession. He said in 2008, Americans had the least amount of equity in their home in the history of time. As we look to 2022 and 2023's recession, though, we're actually going into it with the most amount of equity we have ever had in our homes. That's crazy. The key difference between this recession and 2008 is that homeowners are actually going to have an out this time. They will be able to sell their homes if they need to. But of course, if everyone's rushing to sell their homes at once, that leads to a wider market crash with more sellers than buyers, causing home values to decrease dramatically, but still people will be able to exit. Also, according to Dave Ramsey, you want to make sure that you cover your four walls first: your food, your utilities, your shelter, and your transportation, and if possible, stock up some extra cash during this time. If you're already saving, continue doing so. A key factor during a recession is to avoid taking any additional debt on. Reducing your debt and your everyday spending is a key way, and actually one of the easiest ways to help protect yourself and your family during a recession. Now, most experts recommend saving 20% of your income into an emergency fund. And when that fund's stocked up, then you can start investing. But you should have at least 3 months of regular spending saved so you can really, have that emergency money available, preferably 6 months. And that can make a significant difference during a recession. Of course, a possible loss of income if you do lose your job. And of course, value stocks, things like that, have historically outperformed growth stocks during periods of elevated interest rates. Higher interest rates harm companies' discounted cash flow valuations, thus hurting high growth stocks. For example, in the past 12 months, we've seen Vanguard's value ETF has actually generated a total return of 2.8% as of November 25th, while Vanguard Growth ETF has actually lost 28.4%. Crazy, right? Certain individual stocks have also outperformed during each of the past 2 US recessions, things like Walmart, Abbott Laboratories, Home Depot, just a few examples of stocks that actually end up beating the S&P 500 in both 2008 and in 2020. Something to think about. Okay, that's it. Subscribe now. See you next time.